My parents always favored my sister and ignored me. You'll never amount to anything, my mom hissed. They only keep you around for the tax break, my sister snorted. I was cleaning the attic when I found a box that wasn't supposed to be there. My name's Cassie, I'm 34 now, and this happened 2 years ago, but it's taken me every bit of that time to feel steady enough to write about it. I used to believe that some people are just born into families that don't know how to love them. That maybe if you're the quiet kid, or the one who doesn't shine quite as bright, it's your job to accept being overlooked. I was born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky. Nice enough place, filled with horses and bourbon and that sweet scent of cut grass in the summer. My parents were respected. My dad, Martin, was a well-known lawyer. My mom, Cecily, was a nurse, one of those sharp women who never wore her hair down and had a gaze that could slice paper. They had my sister, Mariel, 2 years after me. That's where I disappeared. Mariel was the golden child. She danced ballet and won medals. She was homecoming queen. My mom lived for her. She would literally shout from the bleachers at school events, loud enough that even other parents rolled their eyes. Meanwhile, I was the bookish one, awkward with my hands, always more comfortable in libraries than in gyms or studios. My role in the family was undefined. If I spoke, it was too much. If I was quiet, I was sulking. My report cards were met with bland nods, while Mariel's BS were celebrated with ice cream and family outings. The emotional neglect was never loud. That's the thing about this kind of torment, it's in the things not said. The birthday cards without messages. The dinners where my opinion didn't warrant a response. It was subtle, like being slowly erased from your own story. Once, when I was 17, I overheard my mom on the phone with her friend. Cassie? She's smart, I guess. But I don't worry about her the same way I do Mariel. I should have felt comforted. But what I heard was, she doesn't matter. The worst of it was the comments. My mom was never short of a cruel word when she was irritated. You'll never amount to anything if you keep wasting time with those stupid books. Or, you're lucky we keep you around, might as well get a tax break out of it. Once, Mariel repeated that line and laughed. That laughter still rings in my head sometimes. When I turned 18, I left for college in Berea, stayed in Kentucky but far enough to breathe. I went on to build a quiet, modest life in Cincinnati, working in publishing. I rented a cozy one-bedroom apartment, read novels for a living, and kept a soft barrier between me and my family. I still visited on holidays, mostly out of obligation, not desire. My parents were never cruel enough to cut off entirely, but never kind enough to pull me back in either. Then came the call. My dad had died massive heart attack in his sleep. I hadn't spoken to him in months. He was always more distant than mean, the kind of father who knew how to fix a leak or file a tax return but not how to ask about your day. My mom's voice on the phone was as brittle as ever. You'll come to the funeral, won't you? Not a question. An order wrapped in expectation. I said yes. I always said yes. The day I arrived back at the house, nothing had changed. Same beige carpet. Same pictures of Mariel lining the hallway, none of me after age 10. She had blossomed into a successful marketing exec in Chicago. Same polished tone, same superiority. If anything, she was my mother's mirror now. While my mom and Mariel went over estate documents with the lawyer, I volunteered to help clean out the attic. It was dusty and humid, the kind of space that carries old air and older memories. I started sorting through labeled boxes, Christmas decor, old school papers, Mariel's awards, until I spotted one shoved awkwardly behind an old trunk, half covered by a moth-eaten blanket. No label. Just a layer of dust and time. I opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Some torn at the corners, many unopened. All addressed to my mother from someone named Elsie Myers. The first one I read was from 1988, a year after I was born. Cecily, please. I just want to know how she's doing. I'm not trying to take her away. I just want to be a part of her life. I carried her for 9 months. Don't pretend that doesn't mean something. Please don't shut me out. My blood ran cold. Another letter, dated 1990, I'm begging you. Please let me see Cassie. I've respected your space. I've stayed away. But this isn't right. She's my daughter too. I read through a dozen more, my vision blurring with each word. They were all desperate, all signed with the same name, Elsie. One even included a photograph, a woman with wavy dark hair and eyes that looked like mine, holding a baby with a hospital bracelet. On the back, Cassie, October 1987. My hand shook. I couldn't breathe. I took the box downstairs and set it on the table. What is this? I asked. My mom glanced at it, then at me. Her face went still. You weren't supposed to see that, she said flatly. Who is she? She paused. Then poured herself another glass of wine and said, like she was commenting on the weather, she was a mistake. Mariel looked confused. Wait, who is this? She's not your sister's biological mother, Mom said. She's Cassie's. It was a complicated arrangement. Temporary custody turned permanent. She wasn't fit. End of story. But it wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the truth. I asked questions. My mom dodged them, offered just enough to keep me quiet. She said Elsie was unstable. That I would have ended up in foster care if they hadn't stepped in. She made it sound like a mercy. But I didn't feel saved. I felt stolen. That night, I left. Packed a bag, took the box, and drove back to Cincinnati in a daze. The next day, I sat in my apartment and read every single letter. They told a different story, one of a woman who loved her baby and fought for her until she was shut out completely. In the last letter, Elsie included her address. So I wrote her. I mailed the letter with trembling hands, not expecting anything. Maybe the address wasn't even valid anymore. It had been over 30 years. What were the chances she still lived in that tiny apartment in Asheville, North Carolina? A week passed. Then another. I checked my mailbox every day. Nothing. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning, there it was, an envelope with slanted handwriting that looked vaguely familiar, though I'd never seen it before. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Cassie, if it's really you, I can't even put into words what this means. I've waited so long. I'm still here in Asheville. I'd love to meet you, whenever you're ready. Please call me. 828, XXXXXX love, Elsie. My chest ached reading it. I stared at her number for hours before dialing it. I almost hung up when it started ringing. Hello? A voice answered, soft, aged, cautious. I almost said nothing. Then I whispered, Elsie? The pause on the other end lasted just long enough for me to wonder if she'd hung up. Then, Cassie? We didn't cry right away. Neither of us knew how to. But she asked if I was okay, and I said I wasn't sure. I told her I had questions, a lot of them. She said, ask anything. Just give me a chance to answer. So I took time off work and drove down to Asheville. 6 hours on I-75 and US 25 through Tennessee into North Carolina, the mountains swelling up as if the earth itself were holding its breath. When I got to the address she gave, I sat in my car for 10 minutes. Her building was small, red brick, quiet. Neatly kept, with flower boxes on the windowsills. Then the front door opened. A woman stepped out. She was older, with graying hair and the same wary eyes I had. She wore a cardigan buttoned all the way to the top, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The moment she saw me, she started to cry. I don't think I've ever hugged someone the way I hugged her. We sat in her tiny kitchen drinking tea, real tea, not from a box. The stove ticked softly, and the clock above the sink was crooked. I used to write letters every week, she said. After a while I stopped expecting answers. But I never stopped hoping. Why didn't they let you see me? She sighed. It started as an agreement. Your father and I, well, we were young. I was 22 when I had you. Your dad and I weren't married, and I was working nights at a diner. I had postpartum depression, but back then no one knew what that really meant. Just that I was sad and tired all the time. Cecily stepped in under the guise of helping. Then she and Martin petitioned for temporary custody. I thought it would be for a few months. And then? They claimed I was unstable. Unfit. They had money, connections, lawyers. I couldn't fight them. They filed a restraining order after I showed up at your second birthday. I stared at my cup. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a box. Inside were pictures, hospital bracelets, even a lock of baby hair in a tiny zip bag. I kept it all, she said. Just in case. That night, I slept in her guest room, surrounded by the strangest comfort I'd ever known, quiet, but full of love. I hadn't felt that since I was a kid, if I ever really had. We spent the next few days walking around Asheville. She showed me the library she volunteered at, the trails she used to hike, the small garden plot she tended behind the building. Every time we talked, I learned something else about her and, in a strange way, about myself. She loved books. She'd studied literature before dropping out to raise me. She still wrote poetry. She had a cat named Russell who hated everyone except her. She'd never married, never had more children. I couldn't, she said one evening. It always felt like you were still mine, even when they took you. I didn't have space in my heart for anyone else. I thought about my mother and how tightly she'd always clung to Mariel. I thought about the differences in love, how one kind can smother and the other can wait, quietly, patiently, for decades. Eventually, I had to go back to Cincinnati. But I promised to visit again. We called every week. It felt so natural, this connection that had been buried for so long. Then, about 2 months later, I got a text from Mariel. Just 4 words, "Are you talking to her?" I ignored it. The next day, she called. I let it go to voicemail. The day after that, my mother called. I stared at the screen as her name flashed, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to answer. She left a message. Cold. Curt. I hear you're poking around in the past. Be careful what you stir up. We all made sacrifices. That was when I knew. They hadn't saved me. They'd stolen me. I didn't reply to my mother's message. I played it once, then deleted it. She didn't call again. For the first time in my life, silence from her felt like peace. But that peace didn't last long, not with Mariel. She texted again a week later. This time, it was longer. Cass, I know you're angry. I don't know everything that happened, but I remember Mom and Dad saying she was dangerous. That she abandoned you. If they lied, I didn't know. I was just a kid. Please don't shut me out. I stared at that message for a long time. Maybe longer than I should have. There was a version of me that would have rushed to reassure her. The part of me that had always tried to be the good daughter, even when no one noticed. But that part had been quiet lately. Eventually, I wrote back one line, "I'm not angry at you. But I need space to process all of this." She never pushed again. And I appreciated that, in its own way. But it also told me everything I needed to know. Mariel would never fully understand what it had been like to grow up as the invisible one. She had been front and center her whole life, and I'd been the blurry shadow on the edge of every family photo. I threw myself into work to keep my mind busy. But I found myself distracted, thinking about Elsie. About all the years we could have had. I'd lie awake at night, wondering how different things could have been if anyone had thought I deserved to know her. After a few months, I took a leap. I gave up my apartment in Cincinnati. My lease was month to month anyway. I packed up my things, downsized most of my books, and drove back down to Asheville. I found a modest rental near the edge of town, nothing fancy, just a little 2-bedroom with creaky floors and sunlight that hit the windows just right in the morning. When I told Elsie I was moving down, she was quiet for a long time. "You don't have to do that for me," she said, almost whispering. "I'm not," I told her. "I'm doing it for me." And it was true. I wasn't chasing a fantasy. I was reclaiming something I should have always had. A relationship. A sense of origin. Roots that hadn't been poisoned with resentment. We started having Sunday dinners together. Just the two of us at first. Then sometimes with one of her neighbors, an older woman named June who crocheted little blankets for stray cats and told stories about her time as a midwife. Sometimes Russell the cat would sit beside my chair, pretending not to like me while inching just close enough to be touched. It was quiet, unremarkable in many ways, but it felt like healing. One night, as we washed dishes together after a meal, Elsie asked, "Do you remember anything? From before they took you?" I shook my head. "Not really. Just flashes, maybe. Nothing clear." She nodded, not surprised. "I used to dream about you. When you were gone. I'd wake up thinking I heard you crying down the hall." That silence settled again, the one full of things neither of us could say. We'd missed so much. But what mattered was that we were here now. A few weeks later, I started therapy again. It wasn't the first time I'd been in and out of counseling since college, but this time was different. I wasn't just working through childhood neglect or self-worth issues. I was unraveling the entire tapestry of my identity. Trying to figure out where the lies ended and the truth began. My therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Eliza Rollins, helped me piece it together slowly. She never pushed. She just sat with me in the quiet, waiting while I worked through memories that felt heavier than I'd ever let myself admit. "Neglect is still trauma," she said one day. "And what you experienced wasn't just neglect, it was erasure. They tried to overwrite your story. Now you're taking the pen back." That line stuck with me. One afternoon, after a session, I found myself parked outside a small local bookstore in downtown Asheville. I hadn't planned on going in, it was just something I did when I needed to think. But that day, something pulled me inside. I wandered the aisles, fingers brushing spines like familiar faces. And then, near the back, I saw a flyer on a corkboard, seeking part-time editor for small local press. Flexible hours. Passion for literature required. I took a photo of the flyer. Emailed them the next day. 2 weeks later, I had the job. It wasn't a huge salary, but it didn't need to be. I was living small, but meaningfully. For once, my life felt like mine. Elsie was over the moon when I told her. She cooked a whole dinner in celebration: grilled salmon, sautéed greens, and a lemon tart that could have won an award. We toasted with cheap white wine and sat on her balcony afterward, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. She turned to me, her face soft in the light. "You know," she said, "for years I imagined what kind of person you'd be. I never dreamed I'd actually get to know." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I think I'm still figuring that out. But I'm glad I get to figure it out with you." She smiled. It felt strange to feel so whole in a life that had once been built on so much fracture. But somehow, in the cracks, something strong was growing. I lived in Asheville for almost a year before I heard from my mother again. It came in the form of a formal-looking envelope addressed to my new place. No return address. Just my name, Cassie Myers, neatly printed on the front. Inside was a typed letter on thick paper. Polite. Sterile. Unapologetic. "Cassie, I hope this letter finds you well. I understand you've chosen to reconnect with Elsie. While I continue to believe we did what was best at the time, I respect your decision to explore your past. Your father is gone now, and Mariel is busy with her career. I'm downsizing the house and going through family items. I've set aside a few things that may be of interest to you: baby books, a few mementos, photos. If you'd like them, let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume you're not interested." Cecily, I stared at the letter for a while. My therapist always said people show you who they are and what they don't say. And in this case, Cecily had said plenty. No apology. No reflection. Just logistics. I didn't write back. But I knew then that I wanted closure on my terms, not just emotionally, but practically. I wanted to reclaim the parts of my life they'd tried to own. So, I did something that surprised even me. I hired a lawyer. A family law attorney in Asheville named Andrea Connolly. Kind, sharp, and unflinchingly direct. I told her everything from the informal custody arrangement to the forged sense of belonging I'd been sold all my life. She listened carefully, took notes, and said, "You may not be able to undo the past, but you do have rights." Together, we filed a formal request for access to all legal documents related to my custody and adoption, or whatever my parents had claimed it was. The results were enlightening. Turns out, there was never a finalized adoption. No legal documentation transferring full custody. Just a petition for temporary guardianship granted under the assumption that Elsie was unstable and a few strategically placed affidavits from friends of Cecily's supporting that claim. The rest? Circumstantial. Manipulated. Paper thin. I had grounds to challenge it, not for damages or custody reversal, obviously, but for legal recognition. To set the record straight. So we pushed. It took months, but eventually, a family court in North Carolina issued a formal ruling acknowledging Elsie as my biological and legal mother. The ruling couldn't erase the past, but it corrected the record. She was now recognized in the eyes of the law as my parent. When I told her, she cried. Not for the victory, but for the validation. For the first time in 30 years, she wasn't just the woman who gave me up. She was my mother. Then came the real stroke of justice. A local paper in Asheville, the Citizen Times, ran a small piece about the case. Woman reunited with birth mother after custody oversight. It wasn't flashy. Just a human interest column buried in the Sunday edition. But it gained traction on social media. Readers commented about parental rights, misuse of power, and how systems fail vulnerable women. And someone, maybe a nosy neighbor or one of my mom's church friends, sent it to her. Because about 2 weeks later, I got a call from Mariel. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Cass. Mom's furious. Embarrassed. People are asking questions. She said you humiliated her. Honestly, I think you did the right thing. I just wish you'd told me. She paused. I read the article. And I'm sorry. I didn't know what they did to you. I thought we were just a normal family. I didn't call her back right away. I wasn't sure I owed her that. But I did respond to her text later that week. I'm open to talking. But only if we start fresh. No defending what happened. No pretending it didn't hurt. I need honesty. And boundaries. She agreed. We met for coffee when she came through Asheville on a business trip. It wasn't emotional. There were no tears. But she listened. And this time, she didn't make excuses. She just said, I wish I had asked more questions when we were kids. I'm sorry I didn't see it. That was enough for me. As for my mother? I never heard from her again. Not directly. But I did hear from her lawyer. She had attempted to challenge the court's public ruling. Tried to argue that the media had defamed her character. She wanted the article retracted. Her challenge was dismissed. The article stayed up. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a local event hosted by a women's legal advocacy group. They asked me to share my story not as a victim, but as someone who reclaimed her truth. I stood in front of a room of strangers and talked about identity, silence, and power. I saw heads nodding. A few women cried. When I stepped off stage, Elsie was there waiting, smiling through tears. That's my daughter, she said. And in that moment, it finally felt real. Not because the courts said so. Not because a headline did. But because I had finally stepped into my story and told it out loud, beginning to end, without shame. These days, I live quietly but freely. I still work at the local press. I've started writing essays, maybe a book one day. I see Elsie every week. We plant flowers in the spring and tomatoes in the summer. I'm building a life, not a performance. A life where my worth isn't measured by approval or attention, but by peace. I didn't need to destroy my mother. I didn't need to scream or slam doors or expose her to the world. I just told the truth. And sometimes, truth is the best revenge of all.